Hi, it's Kim Butler. Today, Todd Langford and I are going to go over a quick demo on the qualified plan calculator. Todd, this one can be an interesting one, and we're just going to cover it lightly today.
Yeah, so we'll go over the inputs quickly without a lot of detail, but it's one of those calculators that really, I think, helps a client understand what's going on. But as a lead-in, I don't think this is the place to go with this discussion. I think the client already needs to understand that there's some potential problems with what happens in a qualified plan and the desires that the client has for their principles. And so if a client's principles involve control and other pieces along that line, then this really violates the client's principles, and that needs to be discussed before we ever get into the numbers, because this is a very sacred financial vehicle. And for a lot of people, it's something that they need to do to save face at the water cooler. There's lots of pieces around this that make this really difficult thing for people to give up if that's appropriate for them. So they need to understand what's going on, and this really needs to be understood from standpoint principles before we ever get into the numbers. But let's do the numbers and see what it looks like. All right, so current age of 35, we'll go to a projected age of 65, and let's put $100,000 of current assets in there. And let's put an earnings rate of 6%. Let's put a payment in there of, say, $10,000 a year. We won't put a withdrawal. Let's put an employer match. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an employer match of 50%. So we're going to put 50% here on the amount, and we could make that a dollar amount by switching the percent to a dollar, but we're going to leave it at 50%, and we're going to cap what's being matched. So while they are getting a 50% match, what we're going to assume is, though, the match is only matched up to, say, $3,000. So anything over that is actually not getting matched at all. So what that would basically break down to in this scenario is they're getting a $1,500 match. And the reason for that is they're putting a payment in of $10,000, which exceeds the $3,000 cap, and they're getting matched on everything below that cap at 50%. So it's a $1,500 match in this case. Now we're going to go to the tax deferred and tax costs, because all of this looks great at this point in time. We can see a rate of return of 6.37. And where does that 6.37 come from? That comes from the fact that we're earning 6, but we're really getting free money in the form of $1,500 per year from our employer. And that pushes us above the earnings rate of the account from 6 to 6.37, which for most people is going to be a disappointment, because most people in their mind, they hear the 50% part and they automatically think, well, if I'm earning 6 and I'm getting a 50% match, then I'm getting somewhere close to 9%, which would be a 50% increase overall. And that's not what's happening, because the match is only on the contribution, and in this case, it's also capped. All right, so let's look at the tax deferral, which is another advantage. The idea that we get to earn money on the federal government's money. And so here, if we're going to use the federal income tax table, then we need to tax the deferral at the proper place. If I don't put any additional income in here in this additional income slot, then what's going to happen is it's only going to give the deferral at our lowest tax bracket in that 10% range. But that's not the way it happens. Everything in our taxes gets adjusted at the margin as last dollars. And think about it. If I add taxable income or I take taxable income away, where does that come from? It doesn't come out of the middle. It doesn't come off the effective rate. It doesn't come off of the bottom, right? It comes as last dollar. So it's the highest rate always wherever we change our tax amount. So let's say this individual had net taxable income, not including any deferral or deduction for this particular asset, but for everything else, of say $100,000. Maybe they had $130,000 total income, they had $30,000 in deductions, and they net $100,000 of taxable income. That's going to push this up, and you can see the effective tax rate of 22% at age 35 there, that's where the deduction is going to occur. And if we didn't put that in there, then the deduction would only be at 10%, and that wouldn't be given the proper value for that tax deduction that they're getting in their qualified plan at this point. All right. So nothing has actually happened yet because we actually have to also turn on the tax deferral option right there where Kim's cursor is. And now we can see that it pushed our rate of return up to 7.42%. So we're earning 6% on the account, but in theory, we're getting our match, $1,500 a year, plus we're also getting the advantage of the deferral on our taxes for putting money in this account. So we can minimize where that is by clicking the arrow back to the left. And when we do that, we can get a clear picture of what's going on. So the gross account value out in the future is $1.6 million. Now, this is something I would be careful of with the client. And what I mean by that is we need to introduce the idea of inflation potentially here. And this is one of those places where inflation really has an impact, because so often people look out there in the future and say, well, if I've got $1.6 million and I'm currently making $100,000, that's more money than I can even relate to. So I don't need to do any other planning or set up any other strategies because I'm going to be taken care of with that 1.6 million. So I would caution you to bring that back down to reality by using inflation there. All right, so let's look at some other things that exist here, Mr. Client, that you probably haven't been told about. And that's one, management fees. And if we're looking at a 6%,
Todd,
yes.
I just want to interrupt you real quick and point out that what he's done so far is build up the account. So I know when I was learning, sometimes I would want to just plug in all these numbers as I would go, but it's important to build up the account all at one swing, if you will, and then start to reduce the account by the fees and the taxes, et cetera. So that's where he's headed now, which is why we're going to start here as opposed to putting in the management fee on the earlier side.
Right. And it's something we have to be very careful of. We have to empathize with our client and understand that, at least they're saving money, which is more than what a lot of people are doing. And we have to make sure that the bad news that we're about to tell the client is pushed off to bad advice, and that we're not that bearer of bad news, so to speak, right? And that we don't put the client in an awkward position also is something we have to be careful of, because we need to pat them on the back for the fact that they're saving, which is what we did in this first part. And now we're going to go back and just tell them about what they weren't told. This is what was left out. It's not their fault necessarily. It's the fault of the financial industry. And so if we put a management fee, and let's just put 1.5 points of management fee on here. And if we do that, then what we see is that 1.5% management fee took all the advantage that we got from our employer, the free $1,500 a year, plus it took away any advantage we have by, quote, using the federal government's money, because we see our rate of return now below 6%. So all that advantage just got taken away just by the 1.5% management fee. All right. If we look now also at tax cost, and the one thing I want to do, we'll stretch this out when we're talking to the clients and go out over time, but I want to look at this just at what would happen if you liquidated this account, in this case, at age 65. So if we did that, then we see that the taxes come off $384,000. If we look down in the lower left, and the impact is that the future account value is reduced to a net account value of $762,000, and our rate of return is 4.11%. So the point here is we have locked up money for 31 years, and I know it looks like 30 years, but actually age 35 to age 65 is a 31-year time frame. We've locked money up for 31 years to get a whopping 4.11% rate of return for money that we can't make any bigger than what it is, and it carries no additional benefits.
All right. Thanks, Todd. So if you're curious about a bunch of these other buttons, other ways to use the qualified plan calculator, and the solution to some of the problems that the qualified plan arena has, join us at our 3-day truth trainings. We cover this and many more things in depth. Look forward to meeting you there.